Welcome to the Hawaii Book and Music Festival, the wellness track. We are going to speak today about, we have an exciting panel on Red Hill, the medical risks and legal implications. The focus on the Red Hill crisis has been on the US Navy's response and the threat to Oahu's drinking water. But the sense is that there's going to be a longer lasting medical and attendant legal liability. Today we have the area's state representative from the legislature, the engineer and manager of the Honolulu Board of Water Supply, and a prominent local attorney. I'll be serving as the moderator. I'm Dr. Ira Zunin, medical director of Manakai O Malama Integrative Healthcare Group and Rehabilitation Center. So I'll be serving as moderator, but I will also serve as a panelist to discuss the medical issues and the many patients we're seeing who've had exposure to contaminated water from Red Hill. I'd like to introduce Representative Sonny Ganadan. He received his degree in poli-sci and public policy from UCLA and got his JD from Richardson School of Law. He's done a great deal of work defending Native Hawaiian elders, the construction of TMT, the 30-meter telescope, and is currently the representative of District 30, which includes Pearl Harbor, where his constituents are at ground zero on Red Hill. Ernie Lau is the 10th manager and chief engineer of the Honolulu Board of Water Supply. He's responsible for the overall strategic direction and management. The focus is to provide safe, dependable, and affordable water. He served on as administrator of public works previously, and also Hawaii Department of Water back in the 90s. Lyle Hosoda is a prominent local attorney and CEO of Lyle Hosoda and Associates. He graduated from University of Santa Clara and received his JD also from the Richardson School of Law. Specializes in personal injury, commercial and construction litigation, and was selected as to super lawyers for a period of 10 years. So this is a big issue. It's probably going to occupy the news cycle, I think, in the coming years, the way COVID has done and is winding down. We're going to start today with Ernie Lau from the Board of Water Supply, who will talk to us about the physical facts, the history, the physical facts. What is happening with the water? When did it start, and what's happening with defueling the water that's sitting right above our aquifers?
Thank you. Let me get to the beginning of my slides. Sorry about that. Aloha, everybody. Ernie Lau, manager and chief engineer for the Honolulu Board of Water Supply. Thank you for having me. Ira, is the PowerPoint coming clearly through Zoom?
Yeah, perfect. Perfect, Ernie.
Great. Thank you.
Oh, good.
The mission of the board, our vision for Board of Water Supply is Kawai Ola, water for life. And our mission is to provide safe, dependable, and affordable water now and into the future for our community. If we just now think about where does our water come from, and this is kind of a simplified diagram. If you were to slice the island in half, you would see and in the lava rock below the surface of the island, you would see salt water actually that permeates or through the cracks and crevices of that lava rock. And it's shown in this greenish color here. And on top of it, because fresh water is lighter than salt water, much like an iceberg floating, fresh water floating in a salty ocean, you have actually fresh water floating on top of the salt water below our island, which constitutes our underground aquifers. We take water from different ways through tunnels at higher elevations, through shafts that skim off the surface of this underground aquifer, freshwater aquifer, or from deep wells and artesian wells. And really all of our water begins as evaporation and rainfall that falls on our watershed land. So we are very fortunate to have this valuable resource for our island. It's allowed our island to grow to what it is today. We are 100% dependent on this underground groundwater. Now, if you look at the aquifer sectors or areas around the island, this is from the State Water Commission, this map, showing in colors the different aquifers, like the Pearl Harbor aquifer being the largest on the island, able to sustain 166 million gallons a day, able to produce that in a sustainable fashion without degrading. Honolulu is at about 48.5 million gallons a day of capacity. And unfortunately, the Red Hill facility sits right over the drinking water aquifer between Pearl Harbor and Honolulu areas. These tanks that were built underground between 1940 and 1943 for the U.S. Navy are massive tanks. Each one is 250 feet tall, 100 feet in diameter. And you can fit Aloha Tower into one of these tanks, and there are 20 of them. Total capacity of all tanks were full is around 250 million gallons of capacity. And unfortunately, these tanks are located only about 100 feet above, directly over our valuable drinking water aquifer in this area. And right now, there's probably on the order of 104 million gallons of fuel still stored in these tanks. These are some photos of what if you were to go into the Red Hill facility, walking into this access opening about 8 feet in diameter onto this walkway here, and you look down below, you could see the bottom of the tank almost 200 feet below. So this is truly a massive underground storage tank that was constructed almost 80 years ago now. Now, if we were to back off and kind of look up from above, looking down at the Halawa Valley area, you can see the Mauna Loa Freeway, the H3 Freeway, and these black dots here, 2 rows of 10 black dots each, represent the tops of the tanks deep underground on that ridge at Red Hill or Kapukaki. And the Navy property is outlined in black. The 3 circled wells are Navy wells that are currently shut down. Of course, Navy Red Hill shaft was heavily contaminated last year, especially shortly after Thanksgiving. And that is the source of the contamination that entered into the water system of Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam, which is separate from the Board of Water Supply system. The Navy's water system serves almost 93,000 people. So the circled in the yellow are 2 Navy sources shut down. Circled in red are the 3 BWS wells, which we've shut down as a precaution. And the reason for that is underlying this whole area in the Halawa Valley area is the underground aquifer, and it's connected from this side, the Red Hill side of the valley, to also the Halawa or Aiea side of the valley. And our concern, if we kept on pumping from these wells as normal, Halawa Shaft being one of our largest water sources in our system island-wide, we could potentially pull or draw in the underground aquifer contamination that we know is in the area of the fuel tanks and at Red Hill Shaft, and pull it over and be pumped up into our wells and sent into our water system. And that's what we're trying to avoid. And the only way we can do that right now is to keep them closed down for now and almost indefinitely. So the Navy submitted a defueling plan, and I just want to thank the Secretary of Defense on March 7th. He issued a memo for the defueling and closure, a permanent closure of the Red Hill facility. This is the timeline in one of their supplements, 1A. Kind of lays out a timeline from where they were in September all the way to February of 2024. And it looks like this, according to this schedule, it looks like they're still looking at defueling the facility at Red Hill around mid-2024. And they also submitted another supplement 1B. They had conditional approval back in early October for the unpacking or the emptying of the pipelines. And there are 3 pipelines that connect the tanks over at Red Hill under that Red Hill Ridge all the way to Pearl Harbor. And it's over 3 miles. And there are 3 large pipelines, a 16-inch diameter pipe, a 18-inch diameter pipe, and a 32-inch, almost 3-foot diameter across pipeline that carry three types of fuels to and from the tanks in Pearl Harbor. And the Navy just began this week to unpack or empty out the pipeline so they could do repairs to the pipes for defueling in the future. And that started just yesterday. And I understand from the Navy that they've removed about 93,000 gallons of F-24, which is a form of jet fuel. They have about 1 million gallons to go yet. I mean, almost 1 million gallons of fuel to still empty out of those pipes. There are 3 admirals in charge of the issues at Red Hill right now. Admiral Stephen Barnett, commander for Navy Region Hawaii, Rear Admiral Jeffrey Killian, the commander for NAVFAC Pacific, and Rear Admiral John Wade, who was recently named to that post as the Red Hill Joint Task Force commander, and he is responsible precisely for the defueling of the Red Hill underground fuel storage facility. And more recently, just about a week to 2 weeks ago, the Navy suffered some water main breaks in their water system, which is portrayed in this map in light blue. The light blue lines represent pipelines of different sizes. And right now, you can also see here a Red Hill shaft, their Navy Halava shaft. Their only water source that's still pumping is at Waiava shaft, and it's pumping water from near Pearl City eastward all the way up to the Mapunapuna area of Pualoa Road, where there's Eastern Housing is Radford Terrace. You can see how extensive the Navy's water system is, pipelines even running under the airport itself. And in orange, I've noted the approximate location of their break in their 36-inch diameter transmission main. And that caused the Navy a lot of challenges to get water to all their customers, the 93,000 people that live and work at Pearl Harbor for over a week. They also suffered, I think, multiple main breaks during this period, maybe 4 or 5 main breaks, and they were really challenged because of that. We did open up an existing emergency connection near Radford Terrace, which is by this Eastern Housing along Pualoa Road, and provided some degree of support to them. And that's it. That's kind of the background of the Red Hill situation. Right now, there's still the efforts to defuel the facility. They're emptying the pipes first. They're going to have to fix the pipes and then defuel the tanks. And there's still over 100 million gallons of fuel stored in those tanks right over our aquifer. There is also the effort that the Navy needs to proceed forward with the investigation of what happened, how the underground aquifer in this whole area has been impacted by fuel contamination that's leaked out of this facility, whether it be pipelines or tanks over its 80-year history, and more recently last year, figure out what the impacts are to the underground aquifer, how fuel might be moving in that underground aquifer and traveling, say, further westward or eastward, and what other wells might be impacted, especially the wells of the Board of Water Supply. So those are the 2 major efforts that need to get done as soon as possible. Thank you. Ira, you're on mute.
Thank you, Ernie. We've just heard from Ernest Lau, manager of the Honolulu Board of Water Supply. and chief engineer. You're tuned into the Hawaii Book and Music Festival wellness panel on the Red Hill crisis. The basic facts are that in the 40s, the U.S. military built underground tanks that have capacity of up to 250 million gallons of jet fuel and ship fuel that are sitting 100 feet above Oahu's main aquifer, biggest aquifer. Just heard from the manager of Board of Water Supply, and now we'll hear from Representative Sonny Ganadan, whose District 30 is at ground zero. Rep. Ganadan, can you tell us what's happening with your constituents in District 30?
Well, firstly, thank you, Dr. Zunin. To everybody watching here on Zoom, we hope to join you again next year. As a preliminary matter, your ballots are in the mail. You don't necessarily have to vote for me, but do vote. Please participate in this democracy because it's this democracy that kind of upholds the law that we're about to discuss. So again, my name is Sonny Ganadan. I'm hopefully going into my second term representing District 30, which includes Pearl Harbor, Hickam, and the neighborhood going up, Lower Kalihi. Prior to this, I've been an attorney and a journalist. As a matter of fact, I wrote about Red Hill on behalf of a local magazine, and a friend of mine designed an image to go along with the article that I wrote. That image has now gone around the world. So it's the image that you see of kind of like hand drawn with marker, and the tanks at the top, and the ocean at the bottom with all that stuff. So those posters that say "Shut Down Red Hill." Yeah, I helped draw that a few years ago. So that was my introduction to what is happening at Red Hill. My grandfather was in the Army as a Philippine scout. That's how my family became American. I have, other family members and friends who were in the U.S. military, but this experience has really tested my views of the Department of Defense moving forward. If you saw, I'm going to do a little aside now. If you guys saw the new movie Top Gun Maverick, there's a sign at the bar that says you're kicked out of the bar if you disrespect the Navy, a lady, or put your cell phone on the bar. I'm going to not try to get kicked out of the bar right now. I'm going to try to not disrespect the Navy. However, I do have some real concerns moving forward. Ordinarily, the folks at Pearl Harbor, Hickam, they really take care of themselves. A lot of them are there for a short period of time. The civilians who live on base, they are former military or they're military contractors. And prior to this, we didn't realize that there are many civilians who are connected to the Navy's water supply. They reached out as this thing developed, sort of around after Thanksgiving of last year. And they have become quite organized since then. Just last month, a group led mainly by military family members, folks like Manny Feint and others, were just in Washington, D.C. advocating before Congress. Residents of Kapilina Beach Homes have been organized, Faith Action Community Equity, the Oahu Water Protectors, as well as longstanding environmental advocates like the Sierra Club, Blue Planet Foundation, several Native Hawaiian organizations that have called for, both in the courts and in the community, the shutdown of Red Hill, going back many years. I understand that several class actions have been filed, and I believe Lyle is going to be talking about that. As this has developed, the state has done its best through the Department of Health to address the issues. As Mr. Lau mentioned, there were several executive orders issued by our executive branch, and they were eventually followed in March of this year. Those executive orders, it must be remembered, were initially dismissed by the U.S. Navy. So it took quite some effort to get the Department of Defense to acknowledge the legal rights and legal standing of the state of Hawaii. Once they did, we kind of got some traction. The legislature, and I'm proud to have been a part of this process, we developed legislation to assist with testing here on the island. We are in conversation about further medical treatment for those affected by contamination. And we have made tanks such as Red Hill illegal under state law. The federal government has passed significant funding mechanisms to pay for all of this. So you can hear more about that. That was a big part of the gubernatorial discussion between former Congressman or current Congressman Kai Kahele and Dr. Josh Green. I'd like to think that we defended the law under the state constitution and from the perspective of the state and the rights of our citizens. I think it's important to know where the rights of the citizenry comes from. There were many cases that happened in the 1960s and 70s throughout the state of Hawaii, collectively called the PASH cases, which gave the rights of riparian rights, like river rights, and access to the ocean to the community. Those were ruled upon by the Richardson Court. Later, William S. Richardson had a law school named after him, which myself and Lyle went to. And it's really a part of the jurisprudence and the way we think of Hawaii and defending the Hawaii Constitution, that water belongs to the people. And that ideology, that epistemology, it doesn't come from American law. I think that it should be noted that that comes from the history of Hawaii itself. So if you read those PASH cases, the citations go back to the kingdom. The kingdom had the right to the water, and it gave it to the people. Chief Justice Richardson said, well, the state inherits the right to the kingdom, and therefore we have it. Gives it to the counties, and we have a unique situation in which we have access to water. You go to other states, especially on the East Coast, and you can have a gated community, you can't even get to the beach. We know that we are peoples of the ocean. There are many Pacific Islanders here. It's part of our cultural identity and our legal identity. That said, because it's essentially a decolonial concept of water rights here, there are many other places in the world that are much more comfortable about talking about the concept of colonization and decolonization. And I think that this situation in which we've had to have the states had almost an antagonistic relationship with the U.S. Navy might be moving us in more of a direction to have a broader conception of what it means to be an outpost of the U.S. military, similar to what is happening on Guam. They have been in constant litigation and controversy regarding their watershed. So an MOU was actually recently signed with the Guam Watershed Authority and the U.S. Navy. As a result of the Red Hill crisis, I've become more aware of how not unique Red Hill is, how this is actually something that's happening around the world, and how the Department of Defense kind of initially denies its wrongdoing, unfortunately. So not only on Guam, but Camp Lejeune in North Carolina. If you watch Fox News, every other advertisement seems to be about Camp Lejeune and you getting to sign up for litigation around that. There's issues on ships themselves, the USS Lincoln, the USS Nimitz. There's a base in Italy having these issues. Here at home, we know about the cracked aquifer at Kaho'olawe, and it leads to more questions. We don't know about the water issues regarding Makua on the west side of Oahu, or what's happening on Hawaii Island. I think that moving forward, in addition to defending the rights of citizens and the state constitution, I think that we should have a memory that we should remember. So especially for the younger people who were affected by this or who have been kind of swept up by this experience, I think that they should just remember it and remember that the Navy wasn't forthright with the county or the state. In their own reports, they were not just non-compliant, but it's essentially dismissive of the requirements of the Department of Health. And that's what led to this disaster. It wasn't one mistake that happened, but dozens over the course of many years. So if you read these kind of long-winded reports, you can go through the whole timeline of the ways in which a fuel suppression line was installed, numerous contractors would come in at various points in that installation process, how during a tank tightness test, fuel spewed everywhere, how it somehow found its way into a fuel suppression line, should have never been there in the first place, how another contractor hit it with a trolley, how another contractor couldn't figure out how to document the whole thing, how this fuel found its way nearly a kilometer downslope to the Red Hill shaft and to a French drain line that the US Navy didn't know was even there. So it wasn't one mistake, but many. And in the future, I just want us to become more, I guess, akamai would be the word about it, smarter about it, about our relationship to the Department of Defense and the various military holdings around the state of Hawaii, and the way that those holdings can have a health effect on our constituents. I hope to stay in office and to continue to do this work. I think that this isn't what I expected going into this job, but this is going to be an issue that will follow me the duration of my career.
Thank you, Rep. Ganadan. You're tuned into the Hawaii Book and Music Festival wellness panel on the Red Hill crisis. We first heard from Ernie Lau, manager and chief engineer for the Honolulu Board of Water Supply, and just heard now from Rep. Sonny Ganadan, whose District 30 is right at ground zero. We will. I will next speak as a panelist, in addition to aside from moderator, on the experience of our medical facility on rapidly accelerating influx of patients. Our facility is Manakai O Malama Integrative Healthcare Group and Rehabilitation Center, and it's a multidisciplinary team-based facility where we really work in a collaborative manner to try to solve some difficult problems that may not be solved by sort of a la carte access to healthcare. Several months ago, we began to see an influx of patients who are Red Hill victims who live in Rep. Ganadan's district, and began to have a myriad of some of them very severe symptoms that are consistent with exposure to jet fuel and ship fuel, to petroleum products ingested and on the skin, and actually also even in the air. The presentations very commonly we're seeing central nervous system illness. Some patients would appear to have new onset seizure disorder. Others have something called nystagmus, where the eyes just shake back and forth very quickly, and we've been able to document that with a special test for nystagmus. Other patients have gastrointestinal problems with diarrhea and abdominal pain. Others have bladder pain and pain on urination. There's another group that just have primarily skin symptoms, rashes from external exposure to petroleum. Others have sleep disorders. There's a whole group of that have complaints of memory loss, memory lapses, difficulty developing new memory, and then anxiety and other and mood disorders. So it's quite a broad range of symptoms. The patients have come to us. Most of them have TRICARE insurance and have access to military care, but each one that we've seen has reported difficulty accessing what they felt was comprehensive and successful care for their problems. I worked for years before I started my private practice as a contractor in the military, and it is a certain way of practicing medicine. But healthcare in general is not really well suited to take care of new problems with multiple symptoms. So a patient can go to a rheumatologist and complain of joint pain. Joint pain is also a big issue with the petroleum exposure. And the rheumatologist will work that up for autoimmune, for all kinds of other things. They can go to a neurologist and complain of a balance issue. We're seeing a lot of balance issues. And then they'll be ruled out for stroke and other issues there. Go to a GI doc and complain of loose stool. And then it just goes into a whole workup without any particular attention or what we call index of suspicion around a petroleum exposure. So the symptom complex is what really needs to be borne in mind to successfully care for these patients. And even quality insurance that will cover this care is really not enough. But there has been difficulty with access even to TRICARE. So TRICARE approached us a couple of weeks ago, and although patients that have TRICARE for Life and TRICARE Select, who are retired people, TRICARE for Life, and families of active duty military that have TRICARE Select, it's like a PPO. Their plan covers access to civilian providers. TRICARE told us that they're just not covering patients to see civilians because they want them to be seen by the military. And no reason was given. We are continuing to treat TRICARE patients for Red Hill, but more resources will need to come in order for us to sustain that. But as I said, even quality insurance that will cover this care isn't enough. And there needs to be funding for a health facility that is developed to serve Red Hill victims with not just health care, but comprehensive data intake. Where did they live? When was the exposure? How long was the exposure? What are the symptoms? History and physical, a diagnostic workup that includes conventional laboratory studies like clinical labs will check for benzene, but also specialty labs that are not typically covered by insurance that can look for metabolites of jet fuel and ship fuel. And then they need appropriate referrals in treatment where specialists are primed and informed about the Red Hill exposure. Otherwise, it'll be 20 to 50 years from now, and we'll have to go back and have the Red Hill Act, similar to what happened with the PACT Act that was signed into law a couple of months ago, that covers exposure to Camp Lejeune contaminants from the 50s to the 80s, and covers exposure to burn pits while serving in Iraq and Afghanistan many soldiers who stayed at the bases were exposed to burn pits that burned all kinds of toxic substances. What we want to do is treat people now, identify them now, and then also go on to monitor them over the next 10 to 20 years, because there's the immediate health effects of exposure, but there's long-term health effects. And the long-term health effects include an elevated risk for cancers, including leukemias and some solid tumors. One take-home message is that I think that up until now, the focus has been on, well, there can be up to 250 million gallons of jet fuel, 100 feet above the aquifer. We need to defuel. We need to keep testing the water and manage the contamination. But we really need to look at the healthcare. How are we going to take care of these patients? And it's time sensitive and it requires resources. I'm Dr. Ira Zunin from Manakai O Malama. You're tuned into the Hawaii Book and Music Festival panel on Red Hill Crisis. We first heard from Ernie Lau, manager of Board and Water Supply, Rep. Ganadan, whose constituents are District 30 at Ground Zero. And now we'll hear finally from Lyle Hosoda, a prominent local attorney who's managing the legal impacts and implications for Red Hill victims. Mr. Hosoda.
Aloha and good afternoon. I'd like to start by thanking Dr. Zunin and the festival organizers for having me. I initially felt underqualified and was going to say no, but by this point I have learned so much from the others, and thank you to the panelists for having me. And it's a great privilege and honor to be with you. Start by thanking Ernie Lau. Lau, I've watched you and all your work on behalf of the community over these years. I have felt your heart on the interviews with TV and otherwise. You've worked tirelessly for us. Representative Ganadan, same thing. I know that you're working on our behalf, and thank you. Dr. Zunin, you're treating the patients and you're helping the community that way. I view myself the same way. I'm a community member, have been living in these islands basically all my life. At least 2 generations of us here living on the islands. And I view this issue like everybody else. It's a very, very serious, challenging issue that confronts us all. And as Representative Ganadan pointed, it's not just limited to here, but it's an international issue that we're all facing. And it affects each and every one of us, not just the 93,000 that are existing along the lines, the water lines, that issue. We should learn from our past. You know, that act that you just talked about, Camp Lejeune, and let's make sure for everybody that's watching, and thank you to those that are watching, Lejeune, L-E-J-E-U-N-E, L-E-J-E-U-N-E. If you just Google that, you will see that the Marine Corps base or the military base at issue is in North Carolina. And it is some 150,000 acres, and it's a huge base. And over 500,000 military personnel were affected by this period that we've talked about from 1953 to 1987. Again, as Representative Ganadan has pointed out, you see these infomercials, these commercials, these advertisements that are on at all hours of the day, seeking to compensate those that were exposed during that period. Just doing some simple math, if you were 20 years old at the time and you were exposed, and now you have a 30-year period, and then you have another 30-year period that went on top of that to now bring claims, I'm wondering how much good compensation would do to, you know, you're now talking a 70, 80, 90-year-old that's out there, maybe some compensation for their families. But let's do something. Let's do something now. Hopefully we've learned and we can do something different. I think the word that comes to me is trust. You know, our families, our community placed a trust and had trust that they were getting drinkable and water that was clean that they could bathe in. They also placed the trust that in the event that there would be testing to make sure that the water was clean. And then I think there was a trust also. I know that there was a trust that in the event that there was evidence that there was contamination, that then there would be information given, there would be disclosure, there would be accountability, you know, and then there was a trust that in the event that there was accountability, that the accountability would include if they were going to get displaced during the holidays and sent to hotels, that then there would be something done to correct the problem. And that wouldn't be shibai or made up. It would be actual cleaning, not a flushing that didn't accomplish anything, that then put people right back into places where they were asked to trust again, that they were in safe place with safe water, with safe places to bathe. And then there's the medical side to this that Dr. Zunin is facing, and that's these same families, and many of them are military. These are men and women of the armed services that are out protecting our freedom every day. And they are expecting and trusting in our own. It's not the Navy versus us or the United States government against. We are us, and us is them, and it's a we issue, it's a we problem, and it's a we trust. And I think that we on the panel are looking collaboratively, working collaboratively on behalf of the community and all of us to make this right. So in the trust of these service personnel, they're going to the hospital complaining of symptoms. In the beginning, nobody would treat them, nobody would see them, nobody would give them the proper testing or any tests at all to see whether or not what they were experiencing was related to the water or not. And then there's the trust of, okay, you know, they were starting to make diagnoses. And again, the trust is that you would, as a medical professional with the Hippocratic oath of trying to do what's absolutely in the best interest of your patient, there were discoveries and then there were not disclosures. Well, now with the efforts of those that have said we need to investigate Red Hill, Mr. Lau, thank you again, with those that pushed for defueling and then finally the commitment to defuel. Well, there has basically been an acknowledgement at this point by the government that there was contamination, that there was a spill. But yet there is a continued question of trust here where they're saying, no, these families did not receive injuries from this contaminated water. There's a denial that they have been injured as a result of this. Well, is it just a coincidence that all of these people had stomach problems or rashes or the type of symptoms of nausea and the problems of, was it narcosis that you were talking about, Dr. Zunin? Or is it they were all on the same water line? Now, without gathering data, which was not done, or with taking samples of the water and then getting rid of the samples because they thought that flushing would cure it, again, I think there's been a recognition and an acknowledgement that there was contamination. But let's be accountable now for, you know, the results or the consequences of those actions. And that's where we go back to Camp Lejeune and talking about accountability. Now, if you look at Camp Lejeune and, you know, the billions of dollars that were paid to the 850 initial families that filed, you can see where this is a highly political and highly financial issue. So that may explain some of the lack of acknowledgement of families that experienced displacement, that are experiencing, continue to experience serious injury and continued harm. And think about that, the fear and the anxiety that these clients and these people, the community experience when you can't trust, whether or not the water is safe. You can't trust those that were testing. You can't trust whether or not the fear of whether you have cancer or not, the fear of whether or not the 4 miscarriages that were on the same block, was that directly related to this or not? I don't know what my time is, Dr. Zunin, not if I've gone over my time.
Mr. Hosoda, you've got a couple of minutes left. Would you care to address some of the legal remedies that are being sought, and how many law firms, how many attorneys are involved locally on the mainland, and what strategies are lawyers taking to remedy victims' harm?
Great question. I'm affiliated with a mainland law firm called Just Well, Christina Bear. Together, we represent approximately 700 families. There are at least 5 other law firms here locally, many of them that are also affiliated with Mainland Council. And each, we have been in communication. We have been generally working collaboratively. There are different strategies and approaches that each law firm are taken or have taken. Ours, for example, has focused on the Federal Tort Claims Act, and that enables families or those that have been affected to bring claims against the government in certain circumstances. We believe that we qualify for that. As a part of that, you have to file an initial claim form, and that claim form gives the government notice of your claim and gives the government 6 months of an opportunity to address or redress the issue. If it's not resolved within that 6 months, you then have the right to bring a lawsuit. We have advanced over 100 of the claims at the administrative level, and some of them have expired the 6 months. So we have actually filed our first lawsuit, I believe it was in August, on behalf of 4 families. So that is actually in the United States District Court. There are others that have brought claims against the landlords, not the government, but the landlords for each of these individuals. Some of them have been what we call styled as a class action lawsuit. Now, class action lawsuits require that they be certified as a class before they become officially a class action. None of them have been certified to date. My understanding is that some of those that have brought claims against the landlords have contracts which have mandatory arbitration provisions in them, which means that they're in arbitration, and there's a question mark as to whether or not they will become a class at this point. Those are basically the ways that they go. The last thing that I'll say, because it looks like I'm running out of time, is that there are applicable statutes of limitations, and it's generally 2 years from the date of the discovery of the issue or when you have a claim. Now, the Camp Lejeune Act, which was just passed into law this year, which allows claimants to come forward from 53 to 87, those that experience claims, it obviously extended that statute of limitations. But I would encourage those that have been affected to make their claims now and not wait for 35 years to have perhaps another act extending the statute of limitations. I apologize if I went over time, and I thank everyone again.
Mr. Hosoda, thank you so much for your presentation now. You're tuned into the Hawaii Book and Music Festival Crisis on Red Hill. And, we're talking about tanks that are roughly 80 years old that can carry up to 250 million gallons of jet fuel and ship fuel, where we know there's been a lot of leakage and 2 big point events last year. We've heard from Ernie Lau, the manager of the Board of Water Supply. Ernie, you're still with us here. What do you think is the most important thing? What is the priority that should happen that might not yet be happening when it comes to the physical facts and comes to defueling, comes to making sure that the water supply for Southern Oahu is safe?
Thank you, Dr. Zunin. I think one thing to remember is not just the leaks that occurred last year, possibly in May and November of last year, that affected their water system. But also we have to remember, at least from the documents that we can see from the Navy, and they haven't been forthcoming in sharing all their information in their records. There are at least 72 documented releases, perhaps a little bit more now, and about 180,000 gallons of past fuel releases over that long, almost 80-year history. So we have to kind of remember about these legacy fuels going back. I think the first one I'm aware of occurred around 1946 from tank number 16. And they stored fuels of different types. So that also needs to be factored in terms of the risk to the water resources. And right now, I see it's really important to drill more monitor wells. As we're talking to the Navy about locations that Board of Water Supply is going to proceed to drill as quickly as we can, and also the Navy. We need to better understand what's happening underground and in the underground aquifer.
Ernie, we have one question from the viewers of, and that is, how long is it supposed to take until the defueling is done? Right now, this week, for the finally the unpacking of fuel in the pipes has begun. When will the fuel be out of there? Any estimate?
Right now, the Navy's publicly said, and it looks like it's substantiated by their supplement, defueling supplement 1A in that table 6, I believe, that the timeline is that they are going to be at a place, or estimating to be at a place, in February 2024 to get the Department of Health and EPA approval for their defueling. And that assumes, I think, that they've made whatever repairs they need to do to the pipelines and valves to be able to take that fuel out of the tanks. But the Navy has also publicly said that their target is, for now, middle of 2024. So maybe from February to mid 2024, what is that? It's 2 months. So maybe 4 months to defuel the 104 million gallons of fuel, roughly.
And where's the fuel going? We have a question from the audience. Where is the fuel going?
I think the Navy has come out and publicly said that some of the fuel will go to some other locations on Oahu, perhaps private storage down in the Campbell Industrial Area or on the base. Some of the fuel is going to be sent to different locations in the Pacific. They haven't specified it. Some also to the West Coast, because they talked about almost like a super tanker running between Hawaii and the West Coast to move fuel out of Red Hills. So they got 104 million gallons of fuel. They've got a place someplace, some of it on island, other locations maybe in the Pacific, and maybe the West Coast of the US.
Thank you. Rep. Ganadan, you're there at ground zero. You're still on mute. You're there at ground zero, so your constituents are the constituents that are most affected by the contaminated water with jet and ship fuel. I mean, that aquifer, as Mr. Lau was explaining to us, really serves 400, almost 500,000 people on the south-facing shore. But there's 93,000 that are most affected. You're running for re-election now, and should you get re-elected, what are the priorities from the legislative standpoint, the political standpoint, to manage this problem?
We are limited in the state of Hawaii in terms of our jurisdictional reach into land that is owned and managed by the federal government. Our access to cleaning up this water is pursuant to the executive orders, and prior to that, to the lawsuits that Ernie Lau mentioned. I think the Department of Health has done an excellent job of attempting to mandate that the Navy comply with state law in terms of serving safe drinking water to those that are on the Navy's water system. Of course, for years, the Navy really didn't comply with the county or the state in even telling us the reach of their system. So it came to surprise to many of us that folks in Eva Beach were being affected by contamination. I would have put money on people being affected in the Halava neighborhood. I had no idea that those pipes actually ran underneath Halava and then towards Ford Island and then all the way under Pearl Harbor and to Eva Beach. This is an illogical system. Yeah.
Could I ask you if you could accomplish, if you were successful in securing a re-election and you could accomplish one thing for Red Hill in your next term, what would that be?
Doing exactly what we've been talking about during this conversation. So cutting the red tape that individuals need to get appropriate healthcare, expanding the state and county's jurisdictional reach to mandate that people have clean drinking water
Thank you.
on
Thank
all
you,
bases throughout the state.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm Dr. Ira Zunin, Medical Director of Manakai O Malama Integrative Healthcare Group and Rehabilitation Center. I'm a moderator in this panel, also a panelist on the medical issues around Red Hill. We've seen a huge influx of patients who haven't gotten what they felt was reasonable and appropriate care through their military access. And what I would say, if one thing could happen for the health effects of Red Hill victims, is that resources come in a big way and soon that support a designated facility that is developed specifically to treat Red Hill victims, where there are designated specialists, comprehensive data intake, statistical analysis on the problems and the symptoms and the illnesses that we're seeing, and reasonable diagnostic workups and treatment, plus long-term surveillance, long-term monitoring over 10 to 20 years to screen for cancers associated with petroleum exposure, most importantly, leukemias and some solid tumors. I'd like to ask Mr. Lyle Hosoda, a prominent local attorney who has, with a couple of partners, up to 700 Red Hill plaintiffs that he's working with. The one point that you made, I think is important to make again, Lyle, is you said that there's a statute of limitations, and it's very important for anyone who believes they've had exposure or harm from the contamination of Red Hill water, that they not wait to seek representation. What's the story there again?
Yeah, again, the statute is generally 2 years from the date of discovery. Again, I would urge anybody who feels that they have been affected by this to seek counsel. Again, there are many attorneys. There are at least 5 or 6 law firms here locally that you can contact, and you can see that. So I would encourage people to reach out right away and not wait. I mean, there may be a more time given based on the Lejeune Act, but I certainly wouldn't trust it to, once again, coming back to the trust question, is trust that the judges or the judicial system will allow more time or add more time to the usual statute of limitations.
Thank you. Thank you. So we're hearing the same thing from the legal standpoint and the medical standpoint, that if you feel you've been affected, you've been harmed, you've been exposed, best not to wait. This has been a panel, the Hawaii Book and Music Festival, a panel on the Red Hill crisis, where up to 250 million gallons of jet fuel have been stored for the past 80 years, 100 feet above Oahu's main aquifer, with documented and undocumented extensive spills and health effects. Thank you. Roger Jelnick, please.
Aloha. My name is Roger Jelnick. I'm Executive Director of the Hawaii Book and Music Festival. And this panel has been a perfect example of a kind of forum that we've been developing at the festival. We're not simply a book festival. We're an ideas festival. If you look at the program that we've just about to complete, you will see many panels that address critical problems for Hawaii. But this is a particularly good example. And I learned a great deal, and I feel I have a solid grasp of what I should be looking out for in the future, not only what has just happened. So I'd like to thank this panel and Ira Zunin, particularly for moderating and being a panelist, and Lyle Hosoda and Ernie Lau, and Rep. Ganadan, made that mistake before. Thank you so much. Excellent panel. Aloha.
Aloha. Thank you, everyone.
Mahalo.